Hello, my name is Ivy Kagan-Bierman. I'm a partner in the entertainment group at Loeb Loeb, and I'm also the chair of our entertainment labor group. I am so thrilled to be given the opportunity to moderate this amazing panel. When the Roe v. Wade decision came out from the Supreme Court, it sent shockwaves through the world and certainly through the entertainment industry as well. And we have with us great panelists that are going to help us discuss the ramifications of Roe v. Wade in the entertainment industry and what the entertainment industry has done in response, and perhaps what the entertainment industry still needs to do as we move forward in dealing with this decision. So I'd like to briefly introduce the panelists. You can read more about them. They're all illustrious and wonderful women, but I'm going to keep it brief because we have so much to talk about. So let me start first with Kirsten Schaefer, who is the CEO of Women in Film, also referred to as WIF. I'd also like to introduce Nicole Jefferson, a prolific writer-producer. And for those of you who don't know her, Jodie Sweetin, an actor, an entertainer, and also a producer. Thank you to all of you for agreeing to do this today. So we had a prior conversation, and I want today to be very much the same type of, I say it's almost like we're a talk show, same type of conversational. So feel free to jump in and respond to things that other people say. It doesn't have to all come from me. So when the decision first came down, the entertainment industry responded rather quickly. And I know, Kirsten, that WIF came out very quickly with a statement. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the decision to come out with a statement and the substance of that statement.
Sure. I mean, we knew that the decision was going to come down sometime at the end of June, because that's often when those decisions happen. So we had a little time to think through it, and knew that it was important for us to come out and support all of the women who work in the industry, many of whom are in states, work in states where abortion is prohibited, illegal, criminalized. And so we wanted both to support those workers and push the industry to do the same.
So, Kirsten, in addition to putting out the statement that you put out, I think you mentioned when we last spoke about trying to provide some resources. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yes. We pulled together a list of resources that are available on our website that we're continually updating, that let people know where they can go for support within the unions, within their companies, and then in certain regions, just other kinds of support.
And do you happen to know whether women are actually taking advantage of the fact that you've provided these resources? Have you gotten any feedback on that from your staff?
I know that people, we can tell from the clicks that people are definitely on the website looking at them. We don't know how many people have called their companies or have had abortions, while they've been in production or at work. But I think other people on this call maybe have some more direct experience with that.
So in addition to what you did, coming out with a statement, and the entertainment companies, some of them came out with statements as well. Some studios and some networks came out with some statements. Obviously, the guilds and unions came out with some statements. Nicole, as a writer-producer in the industry, when you first heard about the decision and you saw how the industry was responding, what did you think?
Well, I think that I actually feel that the industry response has been a little muted, if we're being candid. And the issue though is that this is a very complicated, very multi-layered situation that has different outcomes depending upon your vantage point and depending upon what aspect of the industry you're working in or what state you're working in. And so I think it's really difficult to have one specific response. I think that we can't look at one specific response across the board that will fix everything. I had the pleasure of hearing Anita Hill speak about this. And, one of the things that she said is that this is going to be a long, ugly, drawn out fight that, may take 50 years to get us back to where we were. And so I think that, any response certainly is welcome and appreciated. But at the same time, I don't expect that any network or studio or company is going to be fully, okay, this is everything that we're doing, coming, on day one, after the decision, because again, it's an unfolding situation. But I do think that I'm a little disappointed in the response throughout the country. Actually, I think that there hasn't been the level of outrage and defiance that I think these laws require. And I absolutely personally feel that most people are probably not connected to how it's going to affect them personally. I think that, I think there has been a lot of, even in some of the people that I've spoken to, not really kind of digesting all of the levels that many of these laws will take in terms of, it's beyond abortion. It's about criminalizing women's health. It's about criminalizing, women, and it's about stealing basic human rights from us all.
Jody, love to hear from you as someone who is an actress and a producer working on a production. I think you mentioned you worked in some hostile abortion states. What do you think also could be helpful in terms of providing real support for women who are on productions and find themselves needing an abortion?
Well, I think that much like Nicole and Kirsten have talked about, this is such a multi-layered issue. So, no matter what the unions do, if they're in a state that is, hostile to abortions, you can't have someone on the production then be, putting themselves in a criminal position and all these sorts of things. And who do you, like you said, privacy, who do you tell? I think that we're going to have to somehow come up with a network throughout the states that is a safe place for women to call, for women to go, for women's healthcare issues, that is in partnership with the union perhaps, but not necessarily of the union. I don't know. I just know that there are a lot of things that the unions and the studios don't want to necessarily participate in, and I understand the hands are sort of tied. But I do think that women on set need a place and someone that they can call, and a representative to know I'm on set at, much like we do with sexual harassment hotlines or, other work problem hotlines. We need to have a place that women can call and say, I'm in Georgia, I'm in Kentucky, or I'm whatever, and I'm working and I need an abortion, or I'm having a miscarriage and I need, what are the steps I take? And there needs to be definite action steps of, okay, this person, gets a personal time off, how many days, things like that. I think that we just sort of need to codify, but do it along with an external organization that can hopefully create a network so that people are supported no matter where that they are.
Well, and I think, Kirsten, you had talked about, women in film or WIF certainly had the sexual harassment hotline. And I know working with Time's Up, that certainly the commission that was started by Anita Hill and Kathleen Kennedy and Nina Shaw, also working on hotlines and ability to report. What makes it so complicated is what Nicole talked about, and I think you just mentioned it again as well, Jody, the criminalization. And so how do you get, Kirsten, I'd love you to address this a bit, how, from your perspective, how do you get people to be comfortable? How do you get an organization to be comfortable to have some type of hotline where people can report? Or do we need to maybe look to an existing organization that is, fighting against this decision in light of the criminality that we're fearful of?
I think one thing that's really unique about this situation is that the public opinion around the right to choose, the right to have an abortion is like there's a huge gap between what the public thinks and where the laws are going or are at in a number of states. And so unlike many other activities that are criminalized, this one, I think, I'm going to say most people believe should not be. And so, I do think that that's a starting place for people to be able to make those calls. As far as building trust, I think one of the things that's really unique about our sexual harassment helpline is that it's not connected to any studio or network or company. It is totally autonomous and staffed by trauma-informed professionals who have a lot of resources available to provide to callers. And I think something similar is going to be needed in this space. I think what may be tricky probably that helpline needs to be physically situated in a state where abortion is safe and legal. And then most likely the helpline responders, will also be safe.
Nicole, you were talking about, policies, and Jody, you were talking about some of the things that people are not necessarily thinking about, such as the person who needs that abortion is going to need some time to travel to the place to get the abortion, have some recovery time. That person may need to be replaced on the set. These were things you both discussed with me. So hopefully in fleshing that out a little bit, maybe we can make a difference for those who hear this panel in terms of policies. Jody, I think you wanted to jump in.
I did, and I almost forgot what I was going to say. I was talking about like what Kirsten was talking about with sort of the external, having it completely autonomous. I think that's something that's really important because this is such a sensitive issue, much like sexual harassment. This is an issue that unfortunately so many women have shame around, and there's so much stigma. To make sure that they can speak with someone outside of the production, so that they know that they're immediately calling a safe person. They're not having to go to a production manager or another producer or someone and take that chance that, like, what if this person is not on the same page? Then what happens? So I think it's really important, like what Kirsten was saying, that we have an external autonomous source, and it may even have to come down to researching state by state and local areas, because there are organizations in abortion-friendly states that will help, and they're volunteers that will help people get across state lines to abortion-friendly places. And so, it's trying to find those, and it may vary from state to state. There may be just needs to be a comprehensive list of resources and some communication.
Nicole, do you want to jump in a bit? You were talking about, you think that we haven't come far enough yet. And so we've been talking about some of these issues and these concerns. Do you have some thoughts about what the entertainment industry could be doing as we move forward with this and try to navigate this?
Sure. I would like to piggyback off of what was said, though, about, I agree that there definitely needs to be, external resources for women. And there are. There's lots of organizations, one of which is I've donated to is the National Network for Abortion Funds, that connect all sorts of abortion support services all across the country into one fund. So it's a one-stop place for people to donate to, as well as then there's regional offices and different organizations that address different people's needs or different services. So I guess one of the things that I just want to clarify is that, a lot of those networks and that a lot of this work has been being done for a really long time. And there are a lot of people who are really skilled and, perhaps maybe in our chat or something however this panel is being presented, perhaps we can, list some of those resources for people. So I think, while it is important that we do that, but there is the piece, especially, as someone who, produces TV, has worked on productions, who's had people come to me when they needed to get abortions, who's had to reschedule around certain, people's procedures and stuff. While, I don't want to also, I do think that there does need to be on the production level and certainly on the network or studio level, there also needs to be a similar kind of resource or helpline, because, somebody can't just disappear for a week and not tell somebody. I mean, and again, this is where this becomes a very complicated and sticky situation, because there are privacy issues, as Jody mentioned. The people in charge might not be supportive or necessarily, a safe, feel like a safe space to, people might worry about their job security behind that. So, these are some of, if not, many other issues, just all the emergency services around it. Yes, women give birth every day, but there are always, through, from the beginning of time, complications and dangers that are involved with giving birth. And, so even just the level of being able to address emergency situations needs to be something that the industry addresses. And I think that, like I said, people are having conversations and people are putting their heads together. But they're difficult situations, again, because, you kind of have to address different things for different jurisdictions and different laws. And also, not every state has the same kind of production needs or the production demands. And that's a real issue too. But something else that I wanted to address, and as I stated before, like just all of the ways in which this issue is not just about people who can get pregnant, it also really is about healthcare. And, we're already looking at a severely damaged healthcare system in this country that was already flawed from the beginning. Now, because of COVID, we've had a mass exodus of doctors, of nurses, of medical professionals from the industry, just who are exhausted, who are burnt out. And we also have a real, problem in this country in terms of having, actual quality healthcare in isolated places and rural places. And in different cities that have, that might not necessarily be as rich or well funded as, our major cities and capitals. So we're already coming into this situation with in terms of, looking, having real serious problems in our healthcare system. And then to actually criminalize doctors, some of the laws, in some of the states actually are targeting the doctors that would perform the abortions or the healthcare, or give the hormones, or give the Plan C pills. So we're asking people who've already been stretched to their limits to now risk jail time, fines, criminal prosecution, just to help people. I mean, that's a lot to ask. And so I think that one of the things that we're all going to experience across the board is there's going to be less doctors. People are going to opt out. People aren't going to want to take those risks. They aren't going to, it's just not worth it. So I think that, when even if you see yourself as, well, I'm not a person who can get pregnant. Yeah, but you might be somebody who might not be able to get a doctor when it comes down to it. If you're shooting in these states, it might be very difficult to find a medic that will work, on set. It might, there's all sorts of extenuating circumstances that, again, are going to affect us all.
So Nicole, what's really interesting, about that is many things are interesting about that. But one of the things that we talked about previously when we were preparing for this, I raised the question with all of you about should A-listers, people like Jody, should actors, should producers, directors, should A-listers say, I don't want to produce my TV show or my film in that particular location? And should companies say, we're going to boycott certain locations? And it was very interesting to hear your perspectives on that. So I'd love to now move in that direction, knowing that we're already seeing, as Nicole, as you said, people are leaving those states. Good doctors are leaving. People are leaving. Do we think it's a good thing for the entertainment industry to potentially only do productions in states that are friendly to and support a woman's right to choose? Jody, would you like to address that?
There's pros and cons to both, right? You realize the industry and the jobs and all the things that production often brings to a location, to a city, that are really vital, to big cities and some of the smaller locations. But we all know that when you hit people or government or whatever in financial areas, that's the impact that hurts. And that's the one that makes them pay attention. So I do think that studios and networks, I think if there are options to shoot in a location that is abortion friendly, I think that should always be the primary goal. Because if our unions aren't able to support us in all of the states that we work in, then how are we? It just doesn't feel. It doesn't feel like we're just sort of acquiescing to what is. But I do know that pulling industry out of states like Georgia and North Carolina and places would be incredibly detrimental. But at some point, I think people need to take a stand and say, me personally, I have not had to do it yet, but I don't want to work I will say, I won't do it in a particular location if it comes down to it, because I just, it's just really hard for me to give into that. So, but that's my personal thing.
And I have clients that are making those considerations. They really are thinking about it. They were thinking about it with suppressing the vote, places where the vote is being suppressed. There are issues that lead people to think about, do we really want to be in that state? Kirsten, I know an issue that's very important to you, probably important to all of us, is the effect that this decision might have on other rights, LGBTQ rights. And love you to talk a little bit about that. And that may also go to, does it make sense if a state is not, if it's banning abortion and that state also is not favorable to LGBTQ rights? Should the entertainment industry start saying more, we're not going into that state? So love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, we definitely are seeing more homophobic and especially transphobic laws and practices in the last couple of years than we had seen in the last few decades, I would say. Like, we were definitely on a different track, and there has been a fair amount of backslide happening. I think it's really hard because we want to support the women and the queer communities and the POC communities who are in those states. And at the same time should be leveraging our power and influence in as many ways as possible. So I think that that actors and other and creators should be saying, I'm not gonna, shoot in the state where you are gonna make a lot of money off this film or television show unless you're doing these things. So in the case of abortion, I think it should be, unless there's a very clear protocol around what's going to happen if somebody on our crew needs, reproductive health services of many different kinds. including possibly like we're going to send the corporate jet if we need to get somebody out of there quickly and to safety. And then, one of the most heartbreaking stories that came out in the, a couple days after the decision was how many entertainment companies had supported candidates who, put that Supreme Court in place, who, are supporting the homophobic, transphobic, misogynist laws. And so I'd be asking these companies to put money in the other direction and support candidates who are going to protect our rights.
So interesting you mentioned that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jody.
I was going to say, actually, there's a great, not as like an ad or anything, but there's a great app that I really like that that does that you can, for all companies, entertainment companies, gas, car, clothing, everything, and you can check out what they donate to, a majority of. It's called Goods for Us, I think. The little blue. Anyway, it's super helpful. I find Goods Unite Us. That does that, and I use it even when I travel. If I'm like at a place, I'm like, okay, I've a choice between two coffee places, which one do I want? Stuff like that. I think this could be really helpful.
Well, I think people have a perception that the entertainment industry is all liberal, and that really is a misconception. There are all kinds of companies within our business and different political views by the owners of those companies who are making those decisions. So I'm with you, Kirsten. I agree. It would be good to, and you, Jody, to pay attention to, where are those dollars going.
Even the liberal companies are putting money behind those candidates when it supports the shareholders. And so it's complicated.
Also, I just want to say, this is, at its core, again, some of the issues that we're talking about, whether it's the safety for LGBTQA, or it's the abortion issue. I mean, again, these at a certain fundamental level, they're not, liberal or conservative issues. They're safety issues. When, again, as we're talking about workplace safety, we're talking about, so, I mean, when, yes, there's boycotting, but there's also the right that we all have to work in a safe environment. And so, I think that, kind of reframing the question away from, I think, a lot of where the conservative media really loves to kind of poke fun or kind of tries to troll us in terms of, making it be like, oh, these, rich, privileged people are going to, trying to make it a us against them type of thing. I think there's some much more fundamental, important questions that we're asking. As a producer, I don't feel that I could bring a crew, particularly a crew of, people who can get pregnant, to a state that is, that has draconian laws against that, and that will criminalize anyone who participates in that. That is an unsafe work environment. And so I think those are the questions that we have to start asking ourselves. Again, it's too complicated of an issue to be able to say, oh, let's just boycott, because again, there's different companies, there's different levels of production in every state, and there's different needs and laws. So there's never going to be one-stop shop. There's not going to be just like one fix to this solution, this problem. It's going to be very complicated, but I think that we have to make sure that we're asking ourselves the right questions. And I think that's something that if we want to kind of look inside ourselves about, we have done, and I'm not just talking about liberals, I'm talking about the majority of Americans that believe that abortion should be a right. I think we have done a disservice in terms of how we've talked about abortion or not talked about it, how we've tiptoed around it, how we've let ourselves be bullied by, fear-mongering opportunists. and how we've let our and how we were very cavalier and kept our eye off the ball in terms of these laws being repealed. So I think, again, to me, that it's not so much about boycotting or not boycotting. It's about being vocal. It's about being active, and it's about fighting back.
Nicole, I love that you gave us a reframe and talked about it as a safety issue, just as protecting the LGBTQ community on locations, on productions. I love that you said that. I got a little bit of a shockwave that went through me when you said something. And so I want to take this moment to really caution our industry not to do this. You made a comment about concern about taking women who might, get pregnant and need abortions into states that won't enable them to be able to do that. And you're saying that from a good place. And I had this little shockwave because I thought, we're fighting discrimination so much, in our industry. And I could see decision makers who are hiring, for example, crew and others on a production saying, oh, well, this is a state that's hostile to women's rights. So we're going to crew up with, more men. So I'm putting it out there right now, loudly and clearly, that would not be okay, right? So a decision to go into a state that is not pro-choice should not be a decision to not engage women on your crew and in other capacities on your production. That's a choice for those women to make, whether they want to work in those states and be on those productions. But that's a really important consideration. Absolutely. I want to shift for a moment to content. We talked, we've got such great creative people on this Zoom meeting, and I know WIF supports women creating content. So maybe ending on kind of a positive topic, which is how can we as an industry, through content, really educate and maybe change people's perspectives on this? So anyone who wants to jump in and start with that question, I don't know, Kirsten, whether Women in Film is doing anything in particular on this issue in terms of encouraging creation of content, but anyone, feel free.
I think we're definitely encouraging women to incorporate reproductive justice stories in different ways, in ways that are authentic and that represent, the sort of diversity of our country, our states, our population. We pulled together a list this summer of films that address abortion in some way or another, and TV shows, and they're not many. And there aren't many that are doing it. There's a lot where or not a lot. When it does happen, it's often sort of around the trauma. And we aren't seeing it just sort of normalized, like a normal medical procedure, in the way that I have in some British shows or some European shows, and I think we need more of that. And in the same way that we need, it just needs to be easier to say the words vagina, miscarriage, abortion. We just have to say them. And it just has to be part of regular period. We have all of these ways that we disguise it, and as opposed to just coming right out and talking about it. And that's the cultural shift that the industry, that the creators are instrumental in galvanizing.
We saw that with all the women that came out and acknowledged they had an abortion publicly when this decision first came out. Jody, I think you wanted to jump in.
I was just going to say that I so agree with Kirsten on this, and I'm sure Nicole does as well, about the conversations that we have to have about our bodies, about medical procedures, about abortion, about vaginas, about, I have
about menopause and endometriosis. And can you breathe from a female point of view? We don't talk about women's issues at all. We don't talk about breast cancer. I mean, women's health has really been largely silenced. And so, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I have a podcast with my best friend, and we talk about that stuff. We actually, one of our shows was, the title was Boobies, Periods, and Vaginas, because it literally like that. We have 2 girls each. That was all it ever comes down to. But I think the industry can really have an instrumental part in changing that dialogue, because how often do we see an issue being presented, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's, abortion, whether it's gay rights, all these things that come up in television shows that get people talking, that normalize it. And then suddenly people maybe that would never have been exposed to it, or exposed to, a particular viewpoint of why someone had an abortion, or what was going on. I think our industry, it's imperative that we tell those stories consistently, and we continue to normalize it, and we get more women telling their stories and talking about it. And I think, I see with the younger generation, I have 14 and 12-year-old girls. My younger daughter is in Girl Scouts and they did a period product drive at her elementary school in 5th grade. She was talking about it and presenting it to the class, that they needed period supplies for sisters on the streets. I was like, I would have been mortified at that age, but young women are definitely talking about their bodies differently. And I think we need to continue to encourage that, and continue to encourage that in the content that we create and that we put out there.
My son's school, he was not involved with the project, but you may have noticed at the Academy Awards a few years ago, Oakwood High School won an Academy Award for a documentary film that was about periods and about providing the kinds of supplies that women in other countries need when they have a period. So, bravo to them. They actually got an Academy Award for that. Nicole, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I do. I do want to point out, especially, to kind of tie into what you were saying about the potential for women's voices to be silenced, women to be not hired as much as a result of all this. I also think that the content, this need for content to shift really does have to be driven by women. I mean, I think that, let's face it, the reason why there's not that much, content that talks about women's issues, women's health issues, abortion, all of these things, is because, men have predominantly been creators and have kind of driven the conversations around that, even when women are, have been in the room. And so I think that this is a really important point to, to look at what a difference it does make to have a female creator, what a difference it does make to have women actively involved in these conversations and putting them on screen. And, I don't see, men are going to be terribly interested in like a whole movement in terms of, talking about this, and partially just because they can't speak to a lot of these issues. So I just wanted to circle back in that, it is going to fall on us as women to really drive this conversation, to really rethink content, to really change this narrative. And that is all the more reason why we have to keep fighting this fight.
Absolutely. And I often talk about the good men in our industry that are champions, that are supporters. So if you're sitting at a table and you're pitching an idea, and it is about a topic like this, it is about abortion, the men at the table that are recognizing that they should support you in that, instead of, naysaying you. So I'm always very mindful of that. I think there are some good men in our industry that do support the ideas that women have that really can be game changers and move the needle.
Absolutely.
So I'm so thrilled that we had this opportunity to discuss this. And all 3 of you are people that have the ability to help be game changers on this issue. And I know you're committed to doing that. And I'm just very thankful that we had an opportunity to discuss this tonight. Thank you so much.